Hey there, viewers. Ever watch someone fold the second they realize the game's over? Drop your stories in the comments. I want to hear. Today, that's exactly what happened. After just a few words from the judge, Diddy pleaded guilty without hesitation, and now a life sentence might be on the table. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. Whispers in MCs. The Inmate Watchers. Been in here long enough to know when someone's about to break. Some men, they come through those gates already broken, head down, spirit gone, eyes empty like they knew the minute they stepped inside these walls they'd never breathe fresh air again. Others, they show up puffed up, full of fight, chest out like they're gonna run the place. It don't take long to scrape that off them. But then you get the rare ones, the big names, the ones who used to run the world outside. Guys you've seen on TV or in magazines, ones who had private jets and bodyguards and smiled like they owned the air we all breathe. Sean Diddy Combs was one of those. When he first got here at MDC Brooklyn, you could feel the shift. The guards straightened up a little. The inmates, we watched hard, not because we cared who he was, not really, but because when someone that powerful gets thrown in with the rest of us, well, everybody wants to see how long they last. Some bets got made the night he arrived, I'll tell you that much. I remember it clear. He didn't walk in like most men do, dragging their feet, already defeated. Nah, he walked like he still thought it was temporary, like this whole thing was a mistake and somebody would come fix it, that someone important would snap their fingers and unlock the doors just for him. But MDC's got a way of stripping that kind of hope clean off a man. It starts slow, little things you notice first. That first day when they had him standing there in the intake, he looked stiff, like he didn't want to touch nothing. The smell probably got to him. The stale sweat, bleach, mildew in the cracks of the floor. Place smells like despair baked into concrete. They made him strip. Everyone strips. Doesn't matter who you are or how many millions you got sitting in some account. You're just skin and bones to them once you're inside here. And Diddy? He hesitated for half a second. Not enough to argue, but enough to see it in his face. He wasn't used to being told what to do. He's been here a while now, long enough that all that shine's worn off. The designer clothes swapped out for that same orange jumpsuit the rest of us wear, hanging off him a little looser these days. His face, you wouldn't recognize it if you only knew the man from TV. Hollow cheeks, gray creeping through his beard, eyes sunken like he ain't slept a real night in weeks. He's moving slower too, got a limp in his step now, favoring one leg when he walks down the corridor. Some say it's old injuries catching up with him. Others say the stress is eating him from the inside. Nobody says it to his face though. There's still something about him, some leftover shadow of who he was before, that keeps the loud ones quiet. But they talk. Oh yeah, they talk plenty, once his back's turned. Is here. Ain't walking out here, I heard one of the younger guys say last week, shaking his head like he already knew the ending. Can't blame him for thinking that way. 4 times now he's gone up for bail, 4 times shot down. Last one was just days ago. They brought him back through the main hallway after court. Didn't need anyone to tell us the judge denied him again. You could see it written all over his face. The guards don't even hide their smirks anymore. Some of them act like it's personal, like seeing a man like that locked up makes their day. They watch him harder than the rest of us too. Every move he makes, eyes follow, like they're waiting for him to slip up. Or maybe they're just enjoying watching him shrink. Word travels fast in here, faster than it ever should. Inmates got their own ways of getting news before it hits the outside, and lately all the talk's been about how rough he's looking. Some say he's sick. I've even heard a few wild rumors floating around. Stuff about health issues, maybe something deeper. Nothing confirmed, of course, but truth don't always matter much in places like this. Rumors grow legs real easy when there's no sunlight to kill 'em. The thing is, Diddy don't talk much. Keeps to himself most days. Doesn't mix like some of the other high-profile guys who've been through here before. No entourages now. No one orbiting around him. Some inmates tried to test him early on, see if he had any pull left. That didn't go far. Nobody's got loyalty in here unless you're paying in favors or protection, and even that runs thin. Still, you can feel it. The tension's heavier when he's around, like folks are waiting for something, not sure if they're expecting him to crack or if they're hoping for it. Either way, everyone's got their eyes peeled. And there's something else now, too. The whispers started yesterday. Quiet, real low, but enough to catch my ear. One of the kitchen guys said he overheard a couple guards talking in the back. Not official, off the books, but they mentioned something about Diddy being moved again. Not like last time when it was just a court date listed on the schedule. This one ain't on the calendar. No paperwork floating around. It's one of those hush-hush orders that come from way above, and no one down here questions. Some think it's just another routine court hearing, but if that was the case, why hide it? Why slip him out the side door without notice? The last time something like this happened, he came back looking different. Tighter. He wouldn't meet nobody's eyes for days after. I've seen enough men pass through these walls to know when the system's got more cards up its sleeve. They're not done with him yet. Feels like they're circling, waiting to pull the rug out completely. Some of the old heads are saying there's something bigger happening behind closed doors, that maybe the reason they keep dragging him out, denying him bail over and over is because they want him to fold. Pressure makes cracks, and cracks make people talk. Problem is, no one knows who's flipping on who anymore. Every time he leaves for court, the whispers get louder. Who's giving up names? What deals are being made? Who's leaking what to the media? One thing's for sure, Diddy ain't untouchable in here, and whatever's coming next, it ain't gonna be pretty. The guards shift more than usual tonight. Extra checks, doors opening and closing when they usually wouldn't. You can feel it in the air, heavy like a storm's building. Nobody says it out loud, but we all feel the same thing crawling under our skin. Something's coming. And by the time the sun rises tomorrow, I got a feeling Sean Combs might not be holding his head quite so high anymore. Chapter 2. Bail denied. The judge's message. Participation in elevated manland. The Judge Center. Darkness and light. It's funny how quiet a courtroom feels when you're not the one holding the power. I've sat in courtrooms before, seen how they buzz when the cameras are rolling, when the reporters crowd outside the doors, when every seat is filled with people waiting to get a glimpse of a man they used to idolize. But this wasn't one of those courtrooms. There was no audience today, no flashes popping off like they used to when Diddy would show up to award shows in velvet suits, dripping in diamond. The room felt cold, like a hospital operating room, stripped of noise, stripped of life, stripped of all the distractions a man might cling to when the walls are closing in. Just the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the low rustle of papers as the judge shuffled through files thicker than any man's reputation. I was sitting in the back watching the whole thing unfold, and if you didn't know who Sean Combs was before, you might have mistaken him for just another tired man in a cheap suit. His shoulders slumped under the weight of months, years maybe, of pressure. His beard wasn't trimmed, grays poking through like weeds in a cracked sidewalk. Eyes sunken, jaw locked so tight you could almost hear his teeth grind if the room wasn't so damn silent. The orange jumpsuit hidden beneath his blazer couldn't be missed if you knew where to look. His cuffs shifted just slightly beneath the sleeve every time he moved his hands, and even though he tried to sit tall, there was something in his posture that screamed exhaustion. The prosecutor's voice cut through the still air like a blade. No theatrics, no raised voice, just facts, each one like a nail in a coffin that already looked closed. She laid it all out flat. Risk of flight, risk of tampering, risk of something worse. She brought up that footage again, the one everyone's seen by now. CNN had run it over and over. Blurred faces, grainy hallway camera, but clear enough. clear enough to show who held the power in those moments, who crossed lines no one's supposed to cross. She didn't even have to say it, just slid the clip in front of the judge like it spoke for itself. She talked about patterns, coercion, intimidation, the same names coming up in witness lists, patterns the court couldn't ignore. She didn't mention the names too loud, no need. Everyone knew who they were by now. Former associates, exes, insiders who'd all decided it wasn't worth keeping quiet anymore. She painted Diddy not as the mogul the world used to cheer for, but as a liability, a man who'd built too much power, wrapped too many people in his orbit, and now that orbit was breaking apart, leaving only wreckage behind. His lawyer tried, I'll give him that, pulled every string you'd expect, talked about Sean's age, his health, how the stress had left him weaker than people realized, brought up the money, the connections, the fact that he wasn't some flight risk because the world knew his face, knew his name, but you could see it plain on the judge's face. The same expression you see from guards when they've heard too many excuses from too many inmates who think the right words might save them. It wasn't gonna work. Not this time. When the judge finally spoke, there was nothing loud about it. No grand speech, no shouting. Just calm, measured words, each one landing like a brick to the chest. He looked right at Diddy, no blink, no smile, and told him straight, "Your influence is no longer a shield. Your name won't protect you here." Simple, direct, and final. Bail denied. The words hung there, heavy. You could see the shift happen in real time. Diddy didn't flinch, didn't look up, didn't shake his head like some men do when they're trying to hide panic. But something in his face, his eyes maybe, or the way his lips pressed together so tight the color drained from them. Something gave away what was happening underneath. Not shock, not outrage, just resignation. Like a man realizing the game he spent his life playing had rules he couldn't rewrite anymore. For a second I wondered if he was thinking about all those times before, past courtrooms, past scandals, times when the headlines had his name plastered everywhere, but he still managed to spin it back in his favor. Times when money could fix the narrative, or favors could keep mouths shut. How many times had he sat in a room like this before, knowing deep down that he'd walk away untouched? It must have felt like déjà vu at first. But this time, there was no exit plan. When the judge stood, the bailiffs moved fast, like they'd been waiting for that cue. Chains clinked, chairs scraped, and just like that, Diddy was up on his feet again, hands behind his back. Nobody in the gallery stood to watch. No family, no friends. The seats were empty, except for a couple of people like me, who'd been around long enough to know how these things end. He didn't look at us as they led him out, eyes fixed somewhere ahead like he was trying not to see anything at all. Outside the courtroom, the whispers started before the door even shut behind him. Word spreads fast when something big happens in a place like MDC. By the time he got back to the holding area, I bet half the block already knew. Fourth bail attempt denied. No bail. Again. But there was something else stirring too. Something quieter, but heavier. Rumor was his team was scrambling, that after today the calls were coming faster, lawyers talking in circles, people on the outside pulling favors trying to figure out why he keeps getting dragged back and forth when the outcome feels sealed. Some say they're desperate. Others think it's something else. That maybe, just maybe, those quiet court appearances aren't about formalities anymore. That something bigger's being worked out behind the scenes. Something off the record. One of the guards muttered to another as Diddy passed by. Said he wouldn't be surprised if Combs doesn't make it back out for the next one. Said there's whispers about another move happening soon. No paperwork, no schedule, just a late-night call in an unmarked van. I've been inside long enough to know that when things start moving without notice, it's never good for the man at the center of it. And judging by the way Diddy's head stayed low, the way he walked out of that courtroom without a glance back, I think he knows that too. Chapter 3. Behind Closed Doors. It was the kind of night that felt too quiet. The kind where the usual sounds of MDC, the clanking of doors, the low murmur of voices behind walls, even the shuffle of guards making rounds, seemed muffled, like the whole place was holding its breath. I'd been around long enough to notice when something felt off, when the regular rhythm of the place skipped a beat. That night, you could feel it in the air, heavy and thick, like a storm waiting to hit but holding back just long enough to keep everyone uneasy. I didn't see them take Diddy out. None of us did. That's how you know it wasn't standard procedure. Usually when someone's getting transported, it's by the book. Paperwork, schedules, all logged and official. They walk them right through where everyone can see, not because they want to put on a show, but because there's no reason to hide it. This time, whole different vibe. No announcement, no shuffling down the main corridor. Just gone. 1 minute he was in his cell, next thing you know, empty bunk. No explanation, not even the guard said a word when guys started asking where he went. It's the kind of thing that starts whispers, fast and sharp like sparks catching dry grass. In a place like this, silence is never just silence. It means something's happening that they don't want eyes on. By the time the breakfast trays rolled around, everyone knew something was up. Nobody knew where he'd gone, but the guesses flew anyway. Court hearing, another hospital visit. Some guys figured he was being moved for good, transferred out, maybe even cut a deal. But there was no paper trail, no sign of a hearing posted, no legal team waiting by the front. Turns out they took him out through the service entrance, late, past midnight, when the block was on lockdown, most of us asleep or pretending to be. No cuffs, no announcement, just 2 federal agents and a guard who didn't bother making small talk. No lawyers in tow, no public gallery, no cameras anywhere. That's how you know it's not routine. When they want something done quiet, they do it like that. The courtroom wasn't the main one, the big, polished space where the media cameras usually set up shop. This was one of the smaller ones. Back corridors, no windows, no reporters banging on the doors, no family sitting stiff in the front row, just empty seats and cold light overhead. The kind of place meant to keep things off the books. Diddy didn't say a word when they brought him in. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, and maybe he hadn't. That weight loss everyone's been talking about. You couldn't miss it up close. His jumpsuit hung off him, the fabric sagging like it didn't quite belong on his frame. His beard was more gray now than black, patches uneven, eyes sunk so deep into his face they looked hollow. He limped a little when he walked, favoring that knee. Each step careful, like even the act of moving hurt more than it should. Waiting for him at the table wasn't his legal team. No one from his camp. No high-priced suits whispering in his ear, feeding him strategies or reassuring him. Just the judge, sitting at the head of the table like a man who'd already made up his mind. 2 federal agents stood behind him. No expressions, no words exchanged. On the table between them, stacks of sealed files. Thick, worn at the edges, marked with codes and labels meant for eyes that knew how to read between the lines. Diddy stood for a moment, like he wasn't sure if he should sit. No instructions were given. Eventually he lowered himself into the chair across from the judge, his hands resting on the table, fingers tapping slow and quiet. He didn't look at the files, didn't ask questions. He just waited. The judge didn't start with pleasantries. No small talk, no formalities. Just opened the first folder and flipped through a few pages, pausing here and there, like he was reminding himself of the weight he was about to drop. "You know why you're here," the judge finally said, voice low but carrying across the empty room. Diddy didn't answer. He didn't need to. The judge pushed one folder forward, let it sit in front of him without opening it. "These," he said, tapping the file once with a knuckle, "are fresh. Names you know, names you probably trusted." He didn't flip the folder open, just let the implications sit there like an unanswered question. You've seen the pattern by now. People flipping, deals being made. You thought you had control of the board, but the pieces have moved without you. The silence stretched long after the judge stopped speaking. Diddy didn't shift, didn't blink, just kept his eyes fixed on the folder like it might vanish if he stared hard enough. The judge leaned back slightly. "I don't need to tell you how this works. You've lived long enough in this world to know the system doesn't stop grinding just because you don't like where it's headed." Another folder slid forward, thicker this time, paper clipped together with tabs sticking out. He didn't open this one either. "Hospital reports," the judge said casually, almost like he was reciting a grocery list. "Your knees shot, stress markers up, loss of weight, signs of malnutrition. You've been moving through MDC like a ghost, and we both know you don't have much left in the tank." It wasn't said with cruelty, no mockery in his tone, just cold facts laid bare, like they were stripping away whatever armor Diddy might have thought he had left. Then came the kicker. He opened a final folder, this one smaller, just a few pages clipped together, but something about the way he handled it made the air in the room feel heavier. "This is the last door," he said quietly, sliding it across the table. "You can keep dragging this out. Keep letting the vultures circle. Keep losing whatever pieces you've still got left. Or you can take the only offer left on the table." Diddy didn't move right away, just stared at the folder, chest rising and falling, slow, deliberate. He didn't need to open it. Hell, I don't think he wanted to. Whatever was inside, he already knew it wasn't going to be something he liked. The judge sat forward, elbows resting on the table, eyes steady. "One word from you," he said, voice barely above a murmur now. "That's all it takes. Everything else disappears." There was no threat in his tone, no need for one. The threat was already in the room, sitting in the files, written across Diddy's face, etched in every line of his posture. For a long moment, nobody moved. The agent stayed still. The judge didn't blink, and Diddy sat there, breathing slow, fingers motionless, looking like a man who'd been standing at the edge of a cliff for a long time, just now realizing there was no way down except one. That's how they left him. No shouting, no final words, just silence as the agent stood, one motioning toward the door. Diddy rose stiffly, the folder left untouched on the table. Back at MDC, the whispers had already started again before the sun came up. No one knew what was said behind those doors. But it didn't take much guessing to figure out it wasn't good. And something told me the next move wouldn't be his. Chapter 4. The footage nobody's supposed to see. It doesn't matter how long you've been inside. Some news has a way of slipping past the walls. Doesn't matter how thick the concrete is, how many locked doors stand between you and the world outside. Some things bleed through, and today it came bleeding fast. Started with whispers during breakfast. Quiet at first, nothing more than murmurs passed between cells when the guards weren't looking. A name here, a phrase there, tapes. Leaked. It's out now. The words spread like smoke, curling down the corridors, slipping beneath the noise of metal trays clattering and boots on tile. I was in the rec room by the time the details hit full volume. You can always tell when something big's broken outside because the energy in here shifts. Same busted chairs, same busted faces, but suddenly everyone's paying attention to the TV up in the corner. Usually, nobody gives a damn about whatever daytime junk they're running. Court shows, the occasional headline scrolling past. But today, everyone's eyes were glued to the screen because Diddy's face was plastered across it again, and this time it wasn't just the usual rundown of lawsuits or speculation. No, this time they had footage nobody was supposed to see. CNN's got it on loop, their anchor talking fast like they know they're sitting on a gold mine. The Chiron reads, "Exclusive, leaked video shows explosive new evidence against Sean Combs." Below it, split screen shots, grainy security cam stills, blurred figures moving through hallways, timestamps lighting up the corner of each frame. But it's the voiceover that does the real damage. The reporter's careful, real cautious with her words, talking about how investigators had quietly obtained not just surveillance footage but financial records, emails, private recordings tied to exclusive parties, hotel suites, transactions that never should have seen daylight. The kinds of things people bury with NDAs and threats, but somehow, someone's dragged them out into the light. Guys around me are buzzing, you can feel it, shoulders leaning in, smirks creeping up. They don't care about the legal language, the fine print. They care about the fact that the mighty just took another hit, and hits like this, they leave bruises that don't fade. I don't even have to look far to see Diddy. He's sitting at one of the tables across the room, trying to keep his eyes on the tray in front of him, but there's no point. Everyone knows he's listening. Hell, half the eyes in here are on him as much as they are on the screen. You can almost hear the unspoken thoughts, feel the weight pressing down harder with every word the anchor spits out. She's naming names now, not all of them, but enough. Mentions of former business partners turning over documents, event coordinators leaking footage from behind closed doors, financial logs traced back to shell companies, all lining up in a way that paints a clear picture, contracts signed by hands that shouldn't be attached to the events in question. Diddy's signature among them. No room left to argue this one's fabricated or exaggerated. It's not a single accuser anymore. It's paper trails, it's timestamps, it's receipts. One guy standing by the vending machines snickers loud enough for everyone to hear. "Damn, they airing out all his dirty laundry now," he mutters. "Ain't no comeback from that." Another leans in, shaking his head. He thought money was gonna cover it, thought loyalty bought silence. He glances over at Diddy, voice dropping. But even your own people sell you out when the walls start closing. No one says it directly to him. They don't need to. Every word spoken loud enough to reach him, every glance cast sideways, it all hits just the same. He doesn't react, keeps his eyes locked on the table, jaw tight, like he's focusing on keeping something inside from cracking through the surface. It wasn't just the footage either. That was the thing about this kind of news. It's never just one leak. When one hole springs open, the dam starts to crumble. By afternoon, the reports shifted to lawsuits stacking up faster than anyone can keep track of. Another woman stepping forward, story eerily similar to the last. Invites to private events, promises of career opportunities. Nights ending in blurred lines and regret. It's like every skeleton that's been hiding in his closet took one look at the door and decided it was wide open. And the headlines don't let up. Outlets running specials, timelines pieced together in neat digestible segments, legal analysts speculating live about how airtight the case looks now. Phrases like pattern of behavior, predatory practices, and potentially criminal enterprise tossed around like they're facts, not just allegations anymore. Everyone outside's treating it like a done deal, and everyone inside's eating it up. The guards? They're no different. They stand by the walls, arms crossed, watching us, eyes flicking between the TV and Diddy. You can see it in their faces, smug, satisfied. They don't have to lift a finger. They know the real punishment's already happening. Watching a man unravel piece by piece, not with fists, but with the weight of everything he built turning to sand. By the time rec time's over, nobody's talking about anything else. Back in the block, whispers keep rolling, getting sharper, meaner. Some of the younger guys crack jokes about whether he's gonna flip, if he's thinking about cutting a deal now that the evidence is everywhere. Others just shake their heads like they've seen this show before, know exactly how it ends. But me, I keep my eyes on him when he heads back to his cell. He doesn't walk the same way he did when he first got here. No more trying to carry himself like he's got something left to prove. Shoulders hunched just slightly, like the air's gotten heavier and breathing's become a job. He doesn't look at anyone. Doesn't need to. He knows the looks he's getting. Later, when the noise dies down and the block goes quiet, I catch sight of him sitting on his bunk, no books in his hand, no TV on, just staring at the wall like he's trying to see through it. Like maybe if he stares long enough, something will shift, some piece of the puzzle will move in his favor. But that ain't how it works. Not in here. Not when the outside world's already decided how the story ends. And deep down, I think he knows it too. Chapter 5. Health breakdown, hospital transfer. It started like it always does in here. Quiet, barely noticeable. Most mornings roll out the same way at MDC. Trays sliding down the hall, guards calling out names, the shuffle of inmates moving half awake to stand for count. But this morning felt off from the jump. One of those mornings where the guards moved quicker, tighter, like there was something buzzing in their earpieces they weren't sharing. They weren't loud about it, but you could tell. You can always tell when there's something they don't want us to know. Word spread fast enough, as it always does. By midday, everyone knew Diddy was gone. Not transferred, not moved to another block, straight out the building. No formal court transport, no scheduled hearing. Whispers swirled like smoke. Some said medical emergency, others guessed it was just another backdoor deal, maybe one last desperate attempt to get him out. But the guards weren't saying anything, just clamped jaws and blank stares when anybody asked, and that kind of silence, that's what gets people speculating. I caught bits of it later from one of the orderlies who worked intake. He wasn't supposed to talk, but there's always someone who can't help themselves. Said Diddy had been looking rough for days, face sunken in, beard more gray than black, eyes dark hollows. Said he wasn't eating, wasn't sleeping. Word was, his limp had gotten worse too, dragging his leg more than usual, like every step hurt more than the last. Heard he went down hard in the cell, not fainted, not dramatic, just collapsed. No sound, no warning. 1 minute sitting on his bunk, next minute on the ground. They rushed him out under heavy guard, shackled at the ankles, wrists cuffed tight. 2 officers flanking him like he was about to bolt at any second. Not that he could have even tried, not the way he looked. They took him to a Brooklyn hospital, one of the local ones they always use for inmate medical runs. Nothing special. No private rooms, no VIP treatment. Just another nameless body wheeled in through the back entrance, locked down under watch. The thing that stuck with me wasn't just that he'd gone down. It was how fast the outside world picked up on it. By the time evening rolled around, news had already hit the airwaves. Every channel, every site, all flashing the same headline. Diddy rushed to hospital under guard. Health concerns mount. They kept it vague like they always do. No official statement from MDC, no details from the hospital. Just enough to stir up the speculation machine. Anchor after anchor weighing in. Analysts pulling up old photos to compare. Pointing out how much weight he'd lost, how tired he looked stepping into court last week. Every frame dissected, every grimace turned into a soundbite. But those of us inside? We didn't need the headlines to tell us what was happening. We'd seen it unfold in real time. You watch a man long enough, you learn to read between the lines. And Diddy? He'd been unraveling for weeks. The knee injury wasn't new, just something that had gotten worse without the comforts he used to rely on. Private doctors, top-dollar treatments, soft leather chairs and air-conditioned rooms. All gone now. Whatever they'd prescribed him out in the real world, it wasn't making it through these walls. The food sure didn't help either. It's all slop here. Barely warm trays, overcooked mystery meat, portions so small a grown man feels starved by midday. And if you don't eat, your body gives out fast. Diddy barely touched his meals most days. Some of the guys joked about it early on, saying maybe he thought the food was poisoned, or maybe he was just used to gourmet and couldn't stomach this trash. But after a while, nobody laughed. He'd sit there at the table, tray untouched, shoulders hunched, face gaunt. You could almost see his bones through the jumpsuit. Stress has a way of wearing down even the strongest men. And it wasn't just the case hanging over his head. It was the weight of everything crumbling at once. Lawsuits stacking, people flipping, headlines bleeding his name dry. Add to that the whispers around the block. Guys betting on how long before he cracks. Guards watching him with that same cold smirk every time he limped past. The man they wheeled out of here wasn't the same one who walked in. One of the guards who'd been on transport let slip that at the hospital Diddy barely spoke. Didn't argue, didn't ask for special treatment, just laid there, IV in his arm, eyes on the ceiling like he wasn't even in the room. That's the part that stuck with me. It's not the pain that breaks a man, it's realizing no one's coming to save you. I kept thinking about how different it must have felt for him now. Years ago, if he'd needed medical care, it would have been penthouse suites and private specialists flown in overnight. White glove service, silk sheets, someone at the foot of the bed ready to fix whatever needed fixing. Now it's fluorescent lights, thin hospital blankets, and 2 guards posted at the door, making sure he doesn't move an inch without permission. Word came back that they kept him overnight for observation. Something about irregular vitals, dehydration, nothing official, just enough detail to fuel the headlines. Social media lit up quick, some fans praying for him, others not so sympathetic. The talk shows ran wild with theories. Some said he was playing up the health card, trying to pull a sympathy angle before trial. Others hinted at deeper issues, untreated conditions, stress breakdowns, maybe even rumors of something worse. Inside, though, no one believed it was an act. You can fake a lot, but you can't fake the way a man's shoulders slump when he's running on empty. When they brought him back the next day, it wasn't through the main entrance. They snuck him back, same way they took him out. Late, under the radar. But word still got around before morning. Guys kept peeking down the hallway to catch a glimpse when they walked him past. But he didn't meet anyone's eyes. Limp more noticeable now, face pale, sunken deeper, looked like the hospital hadn't done much except buy him another day. By breakfast, the whispers had shifted again. Now the talk wasn't just about the case or the footage leaking or the deals being cut. Now it was about whether his body was gonna give out before the court could. You can't hide weakness in here. It's like blood in the water, and everyone could smell it. Later that day, headlines kept flashing. Is Diddy's health failing behind bars? Experts speculating, reporters talking circles about his hospital trip, what it meant. Some tying it back to the weight loss, the knee injury, the stress piling up. Others hinting at more questions about what kind of medical care he's getting, whether MDC's conditions are breaking him faster than anyone thought. But the part that stuck with me, the part I kept thinking about long after lights out, was how quiet he looked when they walked him back to his cell. Like a man who knew there wasn't anything left to fight with. Not his money, not his connections, not even his own body. And for the first time, watching him limp down that hallway, I realized something. He looked like he knew it too. Chapter 6. The Fifth Deal. No lawyers, no cameras. It happened just like the last time. No warning, no paperwork floating around, no guards announcing anything. Just another night where the rhythm of MDC skipped a beat and you could feel the shift crawling under your skin. I was sitting in my cell when I heard the footsteps, quiet but deliberate, moving down the corridor. The doors didn't clang open, no keys rattling, just soft voices, low murmurs, enough to make you get up off your bunk and press your ear to the wall, trying to catch even a sliver of what was going down. Word filtered through by morning. They took Diddy out again, same way as before. No public schedule, no lawyer present. No press outside waiting to catch a glimpse of him being escorted into court. It wasn't that kind of meeting. By now, nobody in here was surprised when they moved him like that, but this time, something felt heavier, like whatever was waiting on the other side of that hallway wasn't just another hearing or procedural check-in. It was something final. You could sense it on the guards' faces, tight-lipped, eyes not meeting anyone's gaze. They knew. Everyone knew. When they brought him into the room, it wasn't the big courtroom again. It was that same small, windowless space tucked away in the back, where the air felt stale and the lights overhead hummed just a little too loud. No rows of benches, no gallery filled with onlookers, just the judge sitting at the end of the long table, 2 federal agents standing still behind him like statues, no one else. No defense attorneys, no familiar faces to offer comfort or strategy, just Diddy and the weight of whatever was about to be dropped on him. He walked in slower this time, limp, more pronounced, shoulders pulled in like he was carrying something invisible but heavy. His beard looked rougher, more gray creeping through, the hollowness in his face deeper, sharper. He sat down without being told, hands folded tight in front of him, not even glancing at the files spread across the table. It was like he already knew whatever was inside wasn't going to change anything. The judge didn't waste time. No formalities, no fake pleasantries, just reached for one of the thick folders, slid it across the table, and let it sit there between them. "You know what this is," he said, voice flat, almost tired. "New evidence, witness statements, names you'll recognize." Diddy didn't move, didn't even blink. The judge kept going, flipping open the folder, tapping one of the pages with his finger. "A name you know well," he added. "Someone close, closer than the rest." He didn't say who. Didn't have to. You could feel it hit the room like a punch. Somebody from the tight circle. The ones who'd been with him through everything. The ones who'd stayed quiet when everyone else started flipping. Now, even they'd turned. The judge leaned back slightly, letting the weight of it settle. "They've provided enough to seal this," he said. "You understand what that means. You've run out of time. Out of people." The silence stretched long after he stopped speaking. Diddy sat there, staring down at the folder like it wasn't even real. Like maybe if he didn't open it, the words wouldn't sink in. But there was no stopping it now. The judge's voice softened, but it didn't get any kinder. "You've seen the headlines. You've seen how fast they're piling up. Lawsuits, witnesses, more footage coming out every day. This trial will not go in your favor." He paused, then leaned forward, locking eyes with Diddy. "You will not outlast this trial. You will not survive prison. Your name will mean nothing when we're finished." That was the crack in the armor. For a moment, something flickered across Diddy's face. Not anger, not defiance, just something hollow. Something that used to be pride, maybe, now eaten away by the reality pressing in from all sides. I wondered what was running through his head then. Maybe flashes of younger days, standing on stages, cameras flashing, the world hanging on every word. The empire he built, brick by brick, deal after deal. The people who lined up to ride his coattails. Maybe he thought about how untouchable he once felt. How every time the walls seemed to close in, he found a way to push them back. But not this time. The judge reached for another folder, thinner than the others but somehow heavier. He slid it forward, letting it sit right in front of Diddy. "This is the last offer," he said quietly. "You walk into court next week and plead guilty, or we bury everything you ever built." The words hung there like a blade. No lawyer there to argue, no one left to strategize, just Diddy, the folder, and the weight of the choice sitting squarely in his lap. For a long time, he didn't move. Just sat there, breathing slow, eyes fixed on nothing. You could almost see the gears turning. Ego wrestling with survival, pride clashing with the cold facts in front of him. I kept thinking about all the headlines from the past few weeks, the hospital trip, the weight loss, the health rumors, how the media speculated about how much more he could take. Watching him now, I realized they had no idea. This wasn't about how much more he could endure physically. It was about how much more he could take knowing there was no way out. Eventually the judge stood, motioning to the agents. No more words needed. They knew he'd heard enough. As they led Diddy back down the hallway, shoulders hunched, steps slow, I wondered if he was thinking about how quiet everything had gotten. No lawyers waiting at the door, no calls coming in, no one on the outside scrambling to fix things anymore. Just silence. And the deal still sitting on the table. Chapter 7. The Guilty Plea. What they didn't show. It wasn't supposed to be anything out of the ordinary, at least on paper. Just another court appearance, another round of pre-trial motions, nothing new. That's how they sold it. Even the guards moved like it was routine, like the whole thing would play out the same as the last few times. Diddy brought in, his lawyers flanking him. Maybe some technical delays, maybe more back and forth about discovery or jury selection. Their date stamped, another headline crafted, and then back to MDC, where the real waiting happened. That's how it was supposed to go. But by now, everyone in here knew the rhythm had changed. You could feel it long before the transport van pulled up to take him out. Guards not saying much, inmates quiet, listening for something they couldn't quite name yet. Word had already spread about the last meeting, the one where no lawyers showed up, where no cameras were allowed, where the judge slid that folder across the table like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Nobody knew what Diddy said when he walked out of there, but everyone knew something shifted. You don't leave a room like that the same way you entered it. By the time morning rolled around, the buzz was sharp. They had him dressed the same way as usual, jumpsuit swapped for a suit jacket over prison garb, cuffs tucked neatly beneath the sleeves, but you couldn't miss the rest. Face gaunt, beard grown in uneven and more gray than black, eyes sunk back like he hadn't slept in weeks, bloated, tired, moving stiff like the air itself was pressing down on him. None of that was news to those of us who'd been watching, but the media outside, they jumped on it the minute he stepped through the courthouse doors. Every outlet screaming the same thing. Diddy appears frail, bloated, aging before upcoming trial. Cameras zoomed in close, catching every wrinkle, every limp in his step. Analysts speculating live about stress, health, possible breakdowns. Talking heads debating whether he could hold up under pressure, what message he was trying to send showing up looking like that. But all that noise, it missed the real story, because what happened inside that courtroom wasn't broadcast. It wasn't filmed, it wasn't tweeted out in real time. Nobody saw it coming. He sat through the first part like always, jaw tight, barely moving while the lawyers argued motions, filed more paperwork, droned on about procedure. Judge flipping through folders like he had all the time in the world. The usual. But when it came time to set the next court date, when the judge asked if there was anything else to address, Diddy stood. Not rushed, not dramatic, just stood up, slow and steady, hands folded tight in front of him. His lawyers turned, eyebrows raised, confusion flickering across their faces like they didn't know what he was doing. You could almost see the unease crawl across the table. This wasn't in the plan. The judge didn't say a word at first, just looked at him, waiting. And then, barely above a whisper, Diddy spoke. Guilty. That was it. One word. Quiet. No grand speech, no deal read out, no negotiations laid bare for everyone to dissect later. Just that one word, dropped like a stone in the middle of the room. For a second, the silence felt endless. His lawyers didn't even react right away. You could see them trying to process, mouths half open like they wanted to jump in, stop him, but the moment was already slipping past. There was nothing left to say. The judge gave no visible reaction, no smile, no shake of the head, just leaned back slightly in his chair, like he'd been expecting it. Then, without fanfare, the judge spoke clearly, voice carrying across the room. Formal sentencing hearing to be scheduled. No cameras caught what happened after, no official statement from his team, no press release trying to spin it, just a quiet exit. No family in the gallery, no supporters lining the halls. Reporters stood outside the courthouse waiting for something, anything. But he walked past them, Head down, not giving them a soundbite. Back inside MDC, the news hit before he even made it through processing. You could hear the reaction ripple through the block like a shot fired down the corridor. Some guys laughed, sharp, surprised, like they couldn't believe it actually happened. Others went quiet, exchanging looks, knowing exactly what it meant. One of the older guys near me shook his head, muttering under his breath, "That's it. Game over." No one needed to ask what came next. They knew. Sentencing was just a formality now. The life he'd built, the empire, the name, it was already gone. The headlines outside painted it like a shock, media scrambling to explain what led him to fold like that. Talking heads throwing out theories, health failing, legal team losing control, maybe some secret deal made behind closed doors. Industry elites, the ones who used to line up for photos and endorsements, went silent. No statements, no defenses. Just quiet distance, everyone backing away like the building was on fire and they didn't want to get burned. By the end of the day, the block was buzzing, but Diddy's cell stayed dark. No visitors, no noise. Just the sound of the guards locking up for the night, and the next court date already set. Chapter 8. Life Sentence. Looming. No way out. The thing about routine is, it doesn't care who you were before. It doesn't bend for money, for fame, for the weight your name used to carry outside. It doesn't shift for the suits you used to wear or the awards you collected. In here, routine is a machine, grinding forward day after day. Same motions, same faces, same cold meals slapped onto a plastic tray. And once you fall into it, there's no climbing back out. Diddy's routine is no different now. Maybe once, when he first got here, he thought there'd be a way to hold on to some piece of who he was. Maybe he thought there'd be a deal, a loophole, some hidden exit waiting around the corner. But after that guilty plea, after the cameras outside stopped flashing and the headlines moved on, all that faded. What's left is the same scratchy blanket, the same cold slab of a bunk, the same sound of doors slamming shut, locking you into a space barely big enough to stretch your legs. No visitors, no calls, no legal team huddling in corners whispering strategy, just the weight of it all settling in like concrete hardening around him. Word got around quick after court, not just in here but outside too. His companies started cutting ties within hours, corporate boardrooms scrambling, PR teams drafting careful statements, distancing themselves inch by inch. Endorsements yanked. Partnerships under review, products pulled from shelves. Nobody wanted to be the last one left standing next to his name when the sentence came down. And inside these walls, the guards didn't even bother hiding the smirks anymore. Inmates stopped asking him questions, stopped throwing jokes his way. Nobody wanted to be too close when the ground finished crumbling beneath him. Every morning it's the same. Lights flick on, too bright, too early. Trays slid through, same slop passed out, no flavor, no care. He picks at the food, never finishes. Some days he doesn't touch it at all. The weight still dropping off him, face looking sharper now, hollowed out. The gray in his beard's thicker, hair hanging longer over his eyes, shoulders hunched more, steps slower. He doesn't talk to anyone, doesn't look up when the guards call count, just keeps his head down, hands folded, eyes on the floor. The whispers don't stop though. Around the block, guys still talk, because it's impossible not to when a man who once sat at the top of everything is now just another inmate waiting for the hammer to drop. They wonder what he's thinking, if he's planning anything, if he regrets folding so fast. Some of them laugh, say he got what was coming. Others keep quiet, maybe recognizing how fast a fall like that can strip you bare. But Diddy doesn't flinch at any of it. I watch him sometimes from across the block, the way he sits on his bunk at night, back against the wall, staring straight ahead like the cracks in the concrete are telling him a story only he can hear. Maybe they are. Maybe he's playing it all back. Every deal, every stage, every party, every headline. The nights spent on islands, surrounded by people who couldn't wait to be seen with him. The awards shows, the cameras flashing, the private jets waiting on tarmacs. It must feel like another lifetime now, like it belonged to someone else entirely. There is no press here, no entourage, just the hum of the fluorescent lights and the sound of another door locking shut. I keep wondering what's running through his mind, if he's replaying the judge's words over and over like a broken record, the last thing he heard before they walked him back down that hallway after court. You won't survive this system. Simple, cold, final. The sentencing date's set now, another date stamped on the calendar that won't change anything. Formality. The media's already moved on to their next story. His name's still floating out there, sure, but not like it used to. Not the way it commanded attention, turned heads. Now it's just another cautionary tale, another headline about downfall and consequence. And Diddy? He sits on his bunk night after night, eyes dull, gray hair falling forward, shoulders tight. No clock ticking, no exit signs. Just the weight pressing down harder every day. You can see it in the way he breathes, slow and heavy, like he knows. They've already decided his ending.